It's all right, I'm here. We need to get you out of the rain.
I can't. It hurts.
Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples in the universe. What would you sacrifice for a complete stranger? And what if that sacrifice led to something extraordinary? This is that story, asterisk. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you believe in the power of kindness and second chances. Your support helps us bring more inspiring true stories like this one to light. The rain fell in sheets across the cracked pavement of downtown Millfield, the kind of unrelenting downpour that seemed determined to wash away both the grime of the city and the hope of its residents. Among those residents was Jack Mercer, a 34-year-old single father whose weathered face told the story of too many sleepless nights and not enough lucky breaks. Jack pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his shoulders as he hurried down the sidewalk, the soles of his worn work boots splashing through puddles that reflected the neon lights of the pawn shop he'd just exited. In his pocket, the weight of $200 felt simultaneously heavy and impossibly light, heavy with the sacrifice it represented, light with how quickly it would disappear. His daughter Emma's insulin. The rent already 2 weeks late. The electricity bill with its angry red, final notice, stamp. The money wouldn't cover it all, but it would keep Emma's blood sugar stable for another month, and that was all that mattered. Jack checked his watch, a simple Timex, the last gift from his late wife before cancer took her 3 years ago. He had exactly 47 minutes to get to the pharmacy before it closed, then rushed to pick up Emma from the after-school program where the director had been kind enough to let her stay late, despite Jack's mounting tab of late fees. That's when he heard it, a soft cry coming from the narrow alley between the pawn shop and the boarded-up record store. Jack hesitated. He didn't have time for distractions, not today. But something in that sound, a vulnerability that echoed his own, made him pause. "Hello?" he called, stepping cautiously into the alley. "Someone there?" Huddled against the brick wall, partially sheltered by a dumpster, was a woman. Her business suit was soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, and she clutched her ankle with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice strained. "I was mugged. They took everything, my phone, my purse, my shoes." She gestured to her stockinged feet, now dirty and torn. "I tried to run after them and fell. I think my ankle might be broken." Jack's mind raced. The pharmacy. Emma. The insulin. The clock ticking. "Let me help you up," he said, already knowing what he had to do. "There's an urgent care clinic 3 blocks from here." "I can't pay," the woman said, her eyes, a startling shade of amber, meeting his. "They took everything." Jack felt the weight of the $200 in his pocket. Emma's insulin. The rent. The electricity. "I've got you covered," he said, the words escaping before he could reconsider. The woman's name was Sarah, she told him as he helped her limp toward the clinic, her arm draped over his shoulders, his arms supporting her waist. No last name offered, and Jack didn't ask. She'd been in town for a meeting, she explained between winces of pain. Wrong place, wrong time. At the urgent care, Jack handed over his ID and the bulk of his money. The receptionist eyed his worn clothes and Sarah's expensive, if bedraggled, attire with poorly concealed suspicion. "I'll wait," Jack told Sarah as a nurse wheeled her toward the back. "You don't have to," she said, but her eyes said something different, a plea not to be left alone in a strange city with nothing. "I'll wait," Jack repeated, settling into an uncomfortable plastic chair. He called the pharmacy, explained the situation in hushed, desperate tones. The pharmacist, who had known Jack since before Emma was born, agreed to set aside the insulin and wait an extra 30 minutes past closing. Then he called Mrs. Patel at the after-school program, the apology thick in his throat. "Just this once more, Jack," Mrs. Patel said, her voice kind but firm. "Emma can stay with me until you arrive, but we need to discuss a payment plan." "Thank you," Jack whispered, the words inadequate for the gratitude he felt. 2 hours later, Sarah emerged, her ankle wrapped in a compression bandage, crutches under her arms, the cut on her forehead neatly stitched and bandaged. "Sprained, not broken," she said with a weak smile. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." Jack nodded, already calculating. If he skipped dinner for the next week, maybe he could still make the electricity payment. The rent would have to wait. His landlord, Mr. Gaines, had a soft spot for Emma, maybe he'd grant another extension. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Jack asked. "Someone to call?" Sarah's face fell. "My hotel is across town. My colleagues are probably wondering where I am, but I don't know any of their numbers by heart." Jack checked his watch again and made another impossible decision. "I can take you to your hotel," he said. "But first, I need to pick up my daughter and get her medication." "You're welcome to wait somewhere if you'd prefer." "I'll come with you," Sarah interrupted. "It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me." The pharmacy was about to close when they arrived, the pharmacist waiting impatiently by the door. Jack handed over most of his remaining money, tucking the precious insulin into his jacket pocket. Next was the after-school program, where Emma sat at a small table, her dark curls, so like her mother's, falling over her homework. At 10 years old, she was small for her age, a side effect of the type 1 diabetes that had been diagnosed just months after her mother's death, as if fate hadn't been cruel enough. "Daddy," she exclaimed, her face lighting up when she saw him. Then, noticing Sarah with her crutches and bandaged forehead, "Who's that?" "This is Sarah," Jack explained as he helped Emma gather her things. "She had an accident, and I'm helping her get back to her hotel." Emma studied Sarah with the frank curiosity of childhood. "You look like you had a really bad day." Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "I did. But your dad made it better." The bus ride across town was quiet, Emma dozing against Jack's side, Sarah sitting across from them, her crutches propped against the window. Jack could feel exhaustion settling into his bones, but there was still so much to do once he got Emma home: dinner, homework, insulin, bedtime routine. "This is us," Sarah said finally, nodding toward a gleaming high-rise hotel that seemed to touch the clouds. Jack had passed this building countless times but had never had reason to enter. He helped Sarah off the bus, Emma trailing sleepily behind them. In the opulent lobby, the staff's eyes widened at the sight of Sarah's disheveled appearance, then narrowed at Jack and Emma. "Ms. Chen." A man in a tailored suit rushed forward. "We've been trying to reach you for hours." "I was mugged, Richard," Sarah explained. "This man, Jack, he helped me get medical attention." Richard's demeanor changed instantly, his attention now fully on Jack. "Thank you, sir. We'll take care of Ms. Chen from here." Jack nodded, ready to leave, to get Emma home, to figure out how to make it through another day. "Wait," Sarah said, reaching out to touch Jack's arm. "You never told me your last name." "Mercer," Jack replied. "Jack Mercer." Sarah nodded, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Jack Mercer. I won't forget what you did today." Jack smiled tiredly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Sarah said firmly. "They wouldn't have." Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. Jack lifted Emma onto his shoulders, her small arms wrapping around his neck, her breath warm against his ear. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" Emma asked as they waited for the bus that would take them back to their small apartment on the other side of town. "I think so, sweetheart," Jack replied, watching as the lights of the hotel disappeared behind them. "Are we going to be okay?" Emma's voice was small, but the question was enormous. Jack swallowed hard. "We always are, aren't we? Team Mercer against the world." Emma's arms tightened around him. "Team Mercer," she agreed. But as the bus rumbled through the night, Jack wondered how many more impossible choices he could make before there were no choices left at all. 3 days later, Jack was elbow-deep in the engine of a 2010 Honda Civic at Donovan's auto shop, where he'd worked since moving to Millfield 5 years ago. The pay wasn't great, but Pete Donovan was understanding about Jack's need for flexible hours to accommodate Emma's doctor appointments and school events. Mercer. Pete called from the office. Phone call. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and frowned. Nobody ever called him at work except Emma's school, and a call from them usually meant trouble with her blood sugar. "Is it the school?" he asked, already reaching for his jacket. Pete shook his head. "Some fancy-sounding lady. Says it's important." Jack took the grimy receiver, his heart pounding. "Hello? Mr. Mercer? This is Diane Blackwell, Executive Assistant to Sarah Chen, CEO of Horizon Innovations. Ms. Chen would like to meet with you this afternoon, if possible." Jack blinked, trying to process the information. CEO? The woman he'd helped was a CEO? "I'm working until 5, he said automatically. "And then I need to pick up my daughter." "Ms. Chen is happy to meet you at your convenience, Mr. Mercer. She can come to you, or arrange transportation for you and your daughter to her office. She's quite insistent about seeing you today." Jack glanced at Pete, who was pretending not to eavesdrop. "I can take my lunch break at 1. There's a diner across from the shop, Molly's." 1 o'clock at Molly's diner, the woman confirmed. "Ms. Chen will see you then." Jack hung up, his mind racing. Horizon Innovations. Even he had heard of them, a tech company that had revolutionized renewable energy storage or something like that. And Sarah Chen was their CEO. "Everything okay?" Pete asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "I think so," Jack replied, still stunned. "I helped someone the other day. Turns out she's kind of important." Pete raised an eyebrow but didn't press for details. "Take an extra half hour for lunch if you need it. You've got plenty of overtime coming." At precisely 1 o'clock, Jack pushed open the door to Molly's diner, his work clothes exchanged for the clean shirt he kept in his locker for emergencies, his hands scrubbed but still bearing the ingrained stains of motor oil that never quite washed away. Sarah Chen sat in a booth at the back, looking nothing like the bedraggled woman he'd found in the alley. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her suit impeccably tailored, her presence commanding enough that the other diners kept glancing her way. The only evidence of their previous encounter was the small bandage above her eyebrow and the crutches leaning against the booth. "Jack," she said warmly, standing to greet him. "Thank you for meeting me." "Ms. Chen," Jack replied, suddenly aware of the vast gulf between their worlds. "Sarah, please," she insisted, gesturing for him to sit. "I owe you an apology for not being entirely forthcoming about who I was." Jack shrugged. "You'd just been mugged. I didn't exactly introduce myself with my resume either." Sarah smiled, and Jack was struck again by how it transformed her face, softening the sharp edges of her professional demeanor. "I've been trying to find a way to thank you properly," she said, getting straight to the point. "What you did, sacrificing your own needs for a complete stranger, it's rare, Jack. Especially when that sacrifice came at such a high personal cost." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "How did you?" "I had my team do some research," Sarah admitted. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to understand who you were, what your situation was." A waitress approached, and Sarah ordered coffee for both of them, plus a sandwich platter that Jack knew cost more than he typically spent on food in a day. "So now you know I'm a mechanic with a mountain of medical debt who can barely keep the lights on," Jack said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "Is that why you're here? Charity?" Sarah's amber eyes, clear and sharp now, not clouded with pain as they had been in the alley, held his gaze steadily. "No. I'm here because I believe in investing in good people. And you, Jack Mercer, are one of the best I've encountered." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Horizon Innovations has a foundation that provides scholarships for continuing education. I'd like to offer you one. Full tuition for any program of your choice, plus a stipend for living expenses and childcare. Jack stared at the folder, unable to process what she was saying. I can't just go back to school. I have Emma, responsibilities. The stipend would cover that, Sarah explained. And we can work around your schedule. Online courses, evening classes, whatever works for you. I understand from your previous employment records that you were studying engineering before your wife got sick. The mention of his almost career, abandoned when Lisa's cancer diagnosis had derailed their carefully planned life, hit Jack like a physical blow. That was a different lifetime. It doesn't have to stay in the past, Sarah said gently. You have an aptitude for mechanical systems, clearly. Our R&D department could use someone with your practical experience and problem-solving skills. Jack laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. You're offering me a job? You don't even know me. I know enough, Sarah countered. I know you gave up the last of your money to help a stranger when your own child needed medication. I know you've been working 60-hour weeks to keep up with medical bills. I know you haven't missed a single one of your daughter's doctor appointments despite the financial penalties at work. The waitress returned with their coffee and food, providing Jack with a moment to collect his thoughts. Why? He asked finally. Why me? There must be thousands of more qualified people out there. Sarah took a sip of her coffee before answering. When I was 16, my mother got sick. Cancer, like your wife. We had no insurance, no savings. A stranger helped us, paid for her first round of treatment when the hospital was going to turn us away. That stranger changed the trajectory of my life. I promised myself that if I ever had the means, would do the same for someone else. She pushed the folder toward him. This isn't charity, Jack. It's an investment in potential. Yours and Emma's. Jack's hand hovered over the folder, his mind racing with possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider in years. A stable income. Health insurance that would cover Emma's condition without the constant battle with claims departments. A future beyond the next bill, the next crisis. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say you'll think about it, Sarah suggested. Talk to Emma. This affects her too. Jack nodded, finally taking the folder. I'll think about it. Sarah smiled, satisfied. That's all I ask. And Jack? The other day, you said anyone would have done what you did. You were wrong. What you did was extraordinary, and it deserves recognition. As they finished their meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Emma's love of science, Jack's knack for fixing things others had declared beyond repair, Sarah's own journey from community college to the helm of a Fortune 500 company. When it was time for Jack to return to work, Sarah handed him a business card with her personal number written on the back. Call me when you've decided. Or if you have questions. Or if you just want to talk. Jack tucked the card into his pocket alongside the folder. Thank you. Not just for this, but for seeing me. Really seeing me. Sarah's expression softened. That's the easiest part, Jack. You're impossible to miss once someone takes the time to look. That evening, after Emma was tucked into bed, her blood sugar stable, her homework complete, Jack sat at their small kitchen table and opened the folder Sarah had given him. Inside was not just information about the scholarship program, but a comprehensive plan tailored specifically to his situation, childcare options for Emma, flexible work-study positions at Horizon's local office, healthcare coverage that would begin immediately rather than after the standard waiting period. It was thorough, thoughtful, and completely overwhelming. Jack closed the folder and rubbed his eyes. Was this really happening? Could he really trust this sudden change of fortune? Life had taught him that nothing came without a cost, that hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, just checking in. Hope you're not overthinking this. Sarah. Jack smiled despite himself. He typed back, guilty as charged. It's a lot to process. The response came quickly, take all the time you need. The opportunity isn't going anywhere. Jack set his phone down and walked to Emma's bedroom, gently pushing open the door. In the soft glow of her nightlight, he could see her sleeping peacefully, her dark curls spread across the pillow, her insulin pump attached to her small arm. She looked so much like Lisa it sometimes took his breath away. What would you do? He whispered to the memory of his wife. Would you take the chance? He could almost hear her response. When did you become such a coward, Jack Mercer? Lisa had always been the brave one, pushing him to reach higher, dream bigger. She wouldn't want him stuck in this holding pattern of survival, always one emergency away from disaster. Jack returned to the kitchen and picked up his phone again. Before he could second-guess himself, he typed, I'm in. For Emma. For me. For whatever comes next. 6 months later, Jack stood in the lobby of Horizon Innovations Research and Development Building, his student ID badge clipped to his shirt, a textbook tucked under his arm. The transition hadn't been easy, balancing part-time classes with his internship in the mechanical engineering department, helping Emma adjust to her new school and the luxury of comprehensive healthcare that covered not just her insulin but the continuous glucose monitor they'd never been able to afford before. But for the first time in years, Jack was looking forward rather than just trying to make it through each day. Mr. Mercer. The receptionist waved him over. Ms. Chen asked if you could stop by her office before you leave today. 15th floor, whenever you're finished with your project. Jack nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Despite Sarah's insistence that he call her by her first name, despite the monthly dinners she hosted for all the Foundation scholarship recipients, despite the way she always made time to ask about Emma's science fair projects, he still found it hard to reconcile the woman he'd helped in that alley with the powerhouse CEO whose decisions affected thousands of employees worldwide. Later that afternoon, Jack knocked on the door of Sarah's corner office, the city skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her desk. Jack. Sarah greeted him warmly, rising from her chair. The crutches were long gone, but she still walked with the faintest hint of a limp, a permanent reminder of their first meeting. Come in. How are classes going? Good, Jack replied, taking the seat she offered. I'm maintaining a 3.9 GPA, and Professor Harrington says my practical experience gives me an edge in the applied mechanics course. I'm not surprised, Sarah said with a smile. Pete Donovan called me last week, you know. Said you were the best mechanic he'd ever had and wanted to know when I was going to stop hoarding all the talent in the city. Jack laughed. I still help him out on weekends sometimes. Old habits. Loyalty is a virtue, Sarah observed. Speaking of which, that's partly why I wanted to see you today. She slid a folder across the desk, similar to the one she'd given him 6 months ago, but thicker. The board has approved a new initiative, a scholarship program specifically for single parents in STEM fields. Full ride, childcare included, guaranteed internship and job placement upon graduation. Jack opened the folder, scanning the details. This is incredible. How many recipients? Initially, 20 per year, Sarah replied. With the potential to expand if it's successful. And I'd like you to help run it. Jack looked up, startled. Me? I'm still a student myself. Who better to understand what these families need? Sarah countered. You'd work with our foundation team, of course, but your insight would be invaluable. It would be part-time until you graduate, then a full director position if you're interested. Jack sat back, overwhelmed once again by the trajectory his life had taken since that rainy evening. I don't know what to say. You could start with, thank you, Sarah suggested with a teasing smile. And then maybe, yes. Thank you, Jack said sincerely. And yes. Absolutely yes. Sarah's expression softened. You know, when I was lying in that alley, in pain and terrified, I remember thinking that I'd finally found the limit of my self-reliance. That after years of telling myself I didn't need anyone, I was going to be undone by a mugging in a city where no one knew my name. She paused, her amber eyes holding his gaze. And then you appeared, offering help without hesitation, sacrificing what little you had for a complete stranger. You reminded me that we're all connected, that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is accept help, and sometimes the most important thing we can do is offer it. Jack nodded, understanding completely. Team Mercer has expanded a bit since then. Team Horizon, Sarah corrected with a smile. Though Emma still insists it's Team Science when I visit. Jack laughed. She's not wrong. The science club at her new school has been life-changing. She's talking about becoming an endocrinologist now. Smart girl, Sarah said approvingly. We'll need to start a medical scholarship program next. As they continued discussing the details of the new initiative, Jack couldn't help but reflect on how completely his life had transformed in just 6 months. From barely surviving to thriving, from isolation to community, from despair to hope. All because he'd made an impossible choice in an alley on a rainy evening, choosing kindness when it would have been so much easier to walk away. 5 years later, Jack stood at a podium, adjusting the microphone as he surveyed the audience before him, 20 single parents, their children seated proudly beside them, all recipients of the Horizon Pathways scholarship that had changed his own life half a decade earlier. Welcome to Horizon Innovations, he began, his voice steady with the confidence he'd gained over years of leading the program. My name is Jack Mercer, Director of Educational Initiatives and, as of last month, the newest member of the executive leadership team. He paused, smiling as he caught sight of Emma in the front row, now 15 and flourishing, her insulin pump decorated with stickers from the science camps she attended each summer. Beside her sat Sarah, who winked encouragingly. 5 years ago, I was a struggling single father working as a mechanic, drowning in medical debt, making impossible choices every day just to keep my daughter healthy and our lights on. Today, I have an engineering degree, a career I love, and the privilege of helping others find their own paths forward. Jack leaned forward, his gaze moving from face to face in the audience, seeing in each the same mixture of hope and uncertainty he'd once felt himself. People will tell you this is a story about luck, about being in the right place at the right time. They're wrong. This is a story about choices. About choosing kindness even when it costs you something. About choosing to see the humanity in strangers. About choosing to believe that your circumstances don't define your potential. He gestured toward Sarah. Our CEO, Sarah Chen, chose to see possibility in a grease-stained mechanic who helped her when she needed it most. I chose to trust that the future could be different than the past. And now, each of you has chosen to be here, to take this chance, to believe that your lives and the lives of your children can transform in ways you might not yet be able to imagine. Jack smiled, feeling the full circle of his journey in this moment. The scholarship you've received isn't charity. It's an investment, in your potential, in your children's futures, in the contributions you'll make to this company and this community. We believe in you, not because of some abstract corporate philosophy, but because we've walked in your shoes. We know what you're capable of. As he continued his welcome address, Jack caught Sarah's eye again. She nodded slightly, her expression reflecting the same thought that had sustained him through late-night study sessions, challenging exams, and the inevitable moments of doubt. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples in the universe. And sometimes, those ripples become waves that carry us to shores we never dared dream of reaching. Asterisk if this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring true stories of kindness and transformation. Remember, the smallest act of compassion can change someone's entire world, maybe even your own. Share in the comments a time when kindness made a difference in your life, and let's create a community of hope together, asterisk.